of diversity management, it is wild to me that we are so close to being at the end of the semester. And I want to just say that the past few weeks, as I've been grading your assignments, I have been so just incredibly inspired by some of the connections you're drawing, by your insights, by your willingness and ability to engage in these really difficult conversations and to do so with a critical eye and to ask questions and to learn through asking questions. I mean, it's just really inspiring. I love the questions you're asking. I love that you're so engaged in the content, and it really makes me wish that we had this course in person, but I'm looking forward to being able to connect with you all in person next semester. So thanks so much for your efforts. Thank you for your enthusiasm and for really being invested in the course content. It makes such a difference on my end, and really has made this an enjoyable class to teach online. So this week, we're going to be talking about inclusive leadership. So up to this date, we've really talked about broad organizational strategy. We've talked about more HR related functions. But the one component that's going to tie all of those things together is inclusive leadership. So this is going to be the thread that kind of brings everything together and we can use to help weave a broader strategy throughout the organization. So the first thing that we need to note is that when it comes to diversity, we do need strong leaders to help manage our strategy. We need strong leaders to set the vision and to help enact that strategy. So the ability to manage a diverse workforce is becoming a critical role of a leader. Organizations are becoming more diverse in the employees. Organizations are making more public stances about the importance of diversity and inclusion. And we need leaders who are strong enough, who are bold enough, who are confident enough to enact these strategies. So policies and guidelines are not enough if the top management team is not committed to those efforts. So it's really important that the people that are making the decisions at the top, that are setting the vision and mission for the organization, are committed to diversity, because that is how we're going to get other people on board. So while we're talking about leadership, it is necessary that we have to identify what we call this paradoxical dilemma. And this is really that being a leader, being a DEI leader, is not easy. And it really requires that leaders need to balance the potential conflicts that arise from DEI efforts. So there are going to be individuals in organizations who do not value DEI, who may not understand certain social identities, who don't want to engage in the work of reducing biases, who don't believe that certain individuals require support, or that we shouldn't make special efforts for certain individuals. And so there is going to be backlash, unfortunately, that can relate to DEI and just these differing beliefs. And so leaders have to balance being able to address those conflicts, but also balancing the potential loss and innovation, or loss of innovation and performance if they don't focus on DEI efforts. So by ignoring DEI, by not assuming a DEI strategy, by not making improvements to try to make the organization inclusive, you're going to lose top talent. You might see performance harmed among individual employees. And so, yes, there are some downsides. Yes, conflicts arise, but we need to be prepared to address those issues so that we can still leverage the benefits that diversity brings. So, inclusion is particularly important for diversifying the demographics, as well as inviting individuals to actively contribute to the organization and to challenge the status quo. So we need to recognize that we're not just trying to increase diversity in terms of characteristics and what our organization looks like, but really trying to emphasize this culture of respecting differences and of valuing differences, and really trying to leverage those differences in order to make a difference in the organization and also in the community at large. So if we're trying to create this climate of inclusion, right, not just having a diverse workforce, but truly a climate of inclusion, there are two factors, two components. And the first is uniqueness, and the second is belonging. So uniqueness is this recognition that individuals bring unique perspectives, unique backgrounds, that everyone really is different. And it's that uniqueness that makes them special and can contribute to the organization in differential ways. So there's this desire to recognize that one has distinct characteristics, right? Um, and that individuals themselves want other people to recognize their distinct characteristics. So it's not just that we know people are special and unique, but we want other people to recognize how we are special and how we are unique. It makes people feel good, and it makes them feel as though they're part of the team, that they're really contributing to something important. The second factor is belonging. So it's not just that you recognize that individuals have distinct characteristics, it's not just that you recognize your own unique characteristics. Um, it's that we also have a desire to belong to the organization and to the group. So we want to feel as though we're part of the group. We want to feel as though other people care about us and that we're part of a team and not just one individual operating kind of around other people. So, to create a climate of inclusion, we have to make people feel like we care about their unique characteristics, and we have to make people feel like they belong, that they are part of what we're doing. So, the components of inclusive leadership, there are four of them. So, to be an inclusive leader, there are four major things that an individual needs to do. They need to recognize unique talents, so recognize what makes other people special and let them know, because that will make others feel valued. They need to seek out different perspectives. So what are we missing here? What isn't, being represented? What else could we do to get a better handle on the situation, or to better meet market demand, to better serve our constituents, right? What unique perspectives do we need? They'll create a shared purpose and goal to help bring people together, right? That's the belonging. So how can we create a shared purpose and describe how everyone's going to contribute to that purpose? And then, of course, they need to motivate everyone to actively participate. So now everyone knows what the purpose and goal is. How do we bring them in to be part of the team and motivate them to take action? So, when we talk about inclusive leadership and trying to motivate individuals, trying to bring them together for this common good, trying to recognize who they are, we really can tie some of those efforts back to transformational leadership. So, chances are you've heard of transformational leadership in the past. There are 4 I's of transformational leadership. Some of you took my undergraduate class, the Organizational Behavior Mang 422, and I know for certain we talked about this. So, if you have your notes, you can brush those off. But the transformational leadership essentially says that if you want to be a leader who has charisma, who influences others, who really has a vision and gets people on board, there are 4 things you need to do. You need to have an idealized influence, so you behave as a role model and get others invested and they want to follow you because they like you and they care about you. You engage in inspirational motivation, so you figure out what's important to your leader, to your followers, and you use their values and you try to connect what you're doing back to their values to help motivate and inspire them to do the work. You engage in intellectual stimulation, so that there's this sense of curiosity and exploration and willingness to see things in a new way and to talk about things in a new way. And then, of course, individualized consideration. So there's this emphasis, kind of this one-on-one coaching and mentoring of employees. And again, this ties back to being able to see some of their unique characteristics and values and helping them as individuals. So all of this is what makes a transformational leader, those 4 I's. We can combine them with those components we just talked about for inclusive leadership. And so here you can see how each component of transformational leadership maps on to a component of inclusive leadership, and that together those can create a climate of inclusion. So a transformational leader gives individual consideration to individuals and recognizing who they are as a person and what makes them unique. And they also seek out these different perspectives through questioning and curiosity. And so these 2 things together create to a sense of uniqueness. And at the same time, we can create a shared purpose and common goal, while also motivating everyone to participate, leaning on other people's values, using that charisma, and getting people to like you and care about you and being invested in you as a leader. Allows you to create this shared purpose and goal, and together that creates belonging in the organization. So, one really important aspect of inclusive leadership is that we need to walk the talk. We need to do what we say we're going to do, and we need to really put commitment to our words. So, unfortunately, we see this phenomenon called decoupling, which is the difference between what our policy statement says and the practices of the organization. So, when there is a gap between what we say we care about, when we say what our policies are, and what we actually do day to day, that leads to this phenomenon of decoupling. So, our enacted values, this is what we actually do. What are we actually doing? Do we allow people to take advantage of our benefits? Do we allow people to take advantage of certain policies that we have written? Or are they just on the books and we don't really allow people to use them? Um, Discrepancies between what we say we do and what we actually do can lead managers and employees to assume that the organization is not serious about DEI. So, um, if you say that you care about working parents and you say that you want individuals to be able to balance multiple roles in your organization and to be successful, in their personal life and in their work life, and yet you don't provide support for working parents through maternity or paternity leave, through flexible scheduling, through allowing for sick days, through paid childcare, there's a discrepancy there. So you can say you care about them, but if you're not actually doing anything to help them or your policies don't support those working parents, well, that's going to create a discrepancy. When these discrepancies exist, it can alienate our minority employees. So, those individuals who feel like they're harmed or who feel like they're not really being recognized or cared about are going to feel that, and it might lead them to feel excluded. It might even lead them to want to leave the organization. And you'll see here, my bullet points kind of got out of whack there. So might be helpful to say that espoused values, right, are what we say are important. Espoused meaning this is what we say, this is what we kind of publicly display. And then enacted values are what we actually do. So we definitely want those two to align. We want to talk about what we're doing and then actually do it. And that's important for showing our employees that we care and that we can be trusted to do what we say. So, inclusive leadership, again, really begins at the top. So, having one random middle manager who cares about DEI is great from an ally perspective, but it's not going to be helpful for the organization as a whole. So, we really need inclusion to start top down. So, overall, we saw this from our global models of diversity management that CEOs and boards set the DEI priorities and strategies. They're going to tell us what direction they see and how they see DEI fitting into the overall organizational goals. Inclusion practices are influenced by the racial and gender diversity among the board. So the people who usually make up our boards set the policies. And so do those individuals reflect back individuals within our organization? And several of you saw this in the LA clean tech incubator group, right? In this case study, we see, hey, that the board that's meant to represent our organization does not look like all of the employees in the organization. So we have to consider who's on the board because they're going to set the direction and policy and the values for DEI. And if that group is not diverse, well, yes, they can still care about diversity, but it's going to have an impact on the type and scope of policies and procedures they set in place. So, one thing that we can't underscore enough is that if we really want to make diversity and inclusion a top priority, we need to measure it. We need to set goals. We need to measure our progress and follow up and say, how are we tracking? Are we meeting our goals? Are we doing what we said we would? Are we doing enough? Is it helping our employees, right? So we need to set up ways to measure percentages of people we're recruiting, percentages of people we're promoting, percentages of people who engage in our employee resource groups or, different functions or celebrations, things like that. We need to be able to assess those things. Also, employee satisfaction and buy-in would be important. We need to hold managers accountable. So part of our performance management system for managers could be the extent to which they support DEI. So if you want to make something really a focus in an organization, you're going to measure it and you're going to hold people accountable through their performance evaluations and through performance management systems, which we'll talk about more in the fall if you get to have that class with me. So the idea is that we need to hold people accountable, and the things that we evaluate them on, those are the things they're going to pay attention to. We need to support flexible work arrangements for parents, for caregivers, right? We kind of have this sandwich generation where workers not only support their own family, but they support parental and other family figures who might need them. We need to allow people to go to doctor's appointments and go to counseling and therapy and really just have time for themselves. And so, can we make work more flexible to account for all the different lifestyles that are represented by our employees? We need to recruit and promote diverse candidates. We talked about that in a prior week. And this recruitment and promotion really comes from leadership in identifying who we want in our organization. Are we meeting our targets? Where are we falling short? We also need to provide leadership education. So we can't assume that just because someone's a manager, they care about DEI. We can't assume that just because they're a manager, they know about DEI or know how to manage it, because chances are they probably don't have a lot of formal training. We say a lot about why DEI is good. We don't really help people to get better at managing it. So we need to provide education opportunities. We need to sponsor ERGs and mentorship programs. So how can we help bring others up through the organization? We give them places to find belonging through ERGs. We give them opportunities to showcase their competence and to become part of the networks from which they've traditionally been excluded. And if we have a chief DEI position, we need to make it meaningful. Does that individual really, truly have a seat at the table? Are they influencing other areas within the organization? Are we carrying through DEI through all the different functions in our organization? Or is DEI kind of a standalone office that just does its own, training once or twice a year? Is it symbolic? Or do these individuals have decision-making authority, and are we looking to them as leaders? So one way that we can explain leaders, and one way that we can use theory to understand why some individuals are included and some are not, is called leader-member exchange theory. You might have heard of this theory through your undergrad classes or even through your leadership course in your current program. But basically, LMX theory focuses on these dyads between the leaders and employees. So a dyadic relationship just means two. So between a leader and an individual employee. So the essence of this theory is that leaders form in-groups and out-groups with certain employees, and that can lead to inequities in support and resources. So basically, we look at a leader, we look at all of their subordinates, and we look at their one-on-one relationships with those individuals. And what we'll find is that some relationships are stronger than others. So in leader-member exchange, there are different stages, and the role-taking stage is based on supervisors' expectations, simple tasks. Usually there's very little responsibility given to employees. So this is kind of the initial phase. When a leader takes over, they start to kind of test the waters to see if they can trust their employees. In the should be role-making phase, trust begins to build and members are categorized. So a leader starts to evaluate how someone is performing and starts to ask themselves if they can trust that person, if they can give them more responsibility, and they start to categorize their members based on those who they think are doing well and those who are not. And then the last phase is called role routinization. So this is a shared understanding regarding goals and behavioral norms. So more or less what happens is a leader takes over, they test the waters, they start to see who they can trust, who they get along with, who they like. And this can lead to the formation of an in-group. So they start to find certain employees with whom they really connect, whom they seem to trust, and who they want to bring into their circle. So this is great if you're in the in-group, but it also can be quite polarizing if you are excluded and in your out-group. So this here is just a depiction of what leader-member exchange looks like. So here you have the leader, and you can see with subordinates A, B, and C, they're in the in-group. So they have these like kind of dual arrows. They're sharing expectations back with each other. They're communicating. They're leading on each other and supporting each other. So the leader supports them. They support the leader. It's this two-way interaction, and they happen quite frequently. and they're high quality. On the other hand, subordinates D, E, and F, these are outgroup interactions, and you can see how there's much more space between the leader and the subordinates. They're more formal. They're only coming one way, so the leader's just telling the subordinates what to do, and that's it. There's not really this two-way communication component. And so you can already get a feel for how the quality of these relationships would be quite different. So this slide here is just a process model to show you the antecedents, so the characteristics that come first for leader-member exchange. So one thing that really drives the quality of relationships is perceived and actual similarity. So what we know is that we tend to like people that are like us. So this can lead to groups that look the same, right? Groups that don't have a lot of diversity, because we tend to like people who are like us. So when we find these shared connections, we bring those people into our in-group. So for instance, if you all go out into the world and you're working and you come across another WVU alum, you might have a shared connection. They might bring you into their circle, right? Because you have these shared similarities. And those are important for forming some of these relationships. But also, different personality traits, trust development, all of these are going to impact the quality of that relationship, whether it's an in-group or an out-group. And then the quality of the relationship, whether you're in the in-group or you're in the out-group, can affect employee attitudes, behaviors, and career success. So their satisfaction, their commitment, whether they want to leave, if they end up being promoted, right? If you work for a leader and you're part of the in-group and they're supporting you, they're going to help you move through the organization and move to different jobs and different positions. If you're in the out-group, you're probably not getting that support. So leader-member exchange basically tells us that when an employee is part of a low-quality exchange, they're in a contractual relationship. I show up and do the work because I'm supposed to, and I don't give really more than I need to, and you're not giving me a lot in return. There tends to be limited trust and support between leaders and employees. We tend to see reduced performance because you're not really emotionally invested in one another. And there's reduced opportunities for moving up or moving into different roles. On the other hand, high-quality exchanges can result in preferential treatment, where the leader favors the in-group, and that can increase the performance of the in-group because they want to do well for the leader. They can increase their citizenship by giving back to the organization. Also leads to increased feedback. We give more feedback to people we feel close to and feel supported and who are in the in-group. And of course, more opportunities. So if we take this back a notch, we can say leader-member exchange is really important for understanding inclusive leadership. Because when we create in-groups and out-groups, we're leaving some people out. We are, by definition, leaving some individuals outside of the circle, and they are not going to get same access to our feedback, to our support, to our concern, or to opportunities in the organization. So kind of final slide here is to consider that we need to look at leadership at all levels, not just the top leadership. Of course, they're the ones who are setting the priorities and giving resources and measuring progress, but we also can hold middle leaders accountable as well. And those middle leaders, it's necessary, and this might be where some of you end up in your organizations. There are things you can do, even if you're not setting the organizational strategy, even if you're not in charge of creating all of the policies. There are still things that middle and entry-level leaders can do to support inclusion. So familiarize yourself with programs and policies so that you know what your organization offers. Use inclusive language so that you're not unnecessarily excluding someone because your language is inappropriate or offensive. Demonstrate a zero tolerance policy for disrespectful behaviors. Intervene and help those individuals who might be from a minority category and who are, may be vulnerable to mistreatment. Advocate for spaces where employees can come together and discuss things that are important to them that might not necessarily be related to work. There's a lot of conflict going on across the globe right now, and there are different ideas and feelings and emotions tied up in, whichever side you might be on. And these events carry over and impact employees in the workplace. So we need to help them have space to work through those differences and to work through their emotions, particularly when we know they're going to affect how they perform day to day. We can check in on our employees. It costs nothing to check in and see how someone's doing, to demonstrate care for them if they're having a hard time, and just to see how they're doing and to get to know them. And of course, we can participate in our own training and development and better ourselves. How can we continue our own growth as an inclusive leader? So, yes, leadership's important, particularly at the very top, because it sets the tone and the priorities and the budget for DEI, but it's really important in the middle of the organization as well, because this is how the policies get carried out. These are the individuals who are daily interacting with employees in large number, and what a difference it can make when all individuals contribute to this inclusive mission and not just individuals at the top. And I think that's where we see a closing of the gap, right? There's less decoupling when we see this carry through of leadership being inclusive at all levels and not just at the top. So this week, you've got some great readings to help you think about inclusion, think about leadership, and to really ask yourself what you could do, what more you could do to prepare yourself to be an inclusive leader when you graduate from the program. All right. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Hope you all have a wonderful week ahead.